Political Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. Hey, you know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution Mutiny. Wow. The U.S. generals and the soldiers are angry. They don't want to fight Iran. But Israel forcing Trump to attack. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, World War III is at hand. Epstein files got Trump by the throat. New information came out today. Something about a 13-year-old girl. That's disgusting. Let's get into the content. Salute.
The United States is preparing a large strike against Iran, and they're sending more forces and assets to the region, with preparations and warnings coming both from the American administration and also from the Zionist regime. But the United States is facing a very big problem now. The second largest aircraft carrier, USS Gerald Ford, is facing a sewage problem. Blocked toilets, sewage, clogged pipelines, homesick, depressed, and angry personnel aboard. What's happening on USS Gerald R. Ford? Asked one article. Well, what's happening here is a problem that apparently the aircraft carriers of the United States have been facing for quite some time now, not with the USS Gerald Ford only. This also led the USS Gerald Ford to go to Crete, to Greece, to try and take a break. Maybe the people aboard are going to have a break in Greece because, well, you know, what are you going to do? There was one very interesting video posted.
They want a break, y'all. They're tired of sitting on the ship at sea like sitting ducks. They need a break. It's tense any day now. They could be dead. That's just a fact. We don't want no U.S. troops to die, but they're very worried. They're very angry. They're just sitting there, and they know they're not facing Venezuela or Iraq. They're very angry at Trump. They know they're puppets. Toilet bowls backed up. You know, this is the U.S. military, y'all. The Iranians, they're not just ready to die for what they believe in. I told y'all this was going to happen. You have on one side, I told y'all you have people who just want to be home with their family. They want to watch football, basketball, hockey, baseball. On the other hand, you have people with nothing to lose. They just ready to get it over with. I knew this would happen.
Said about this. Let me share this with you very quickly.
The planned U.S. attack on Iran has a hitch. Most of the bomb targeting crew are busy queuing for toilets on the lead vessel, the USS Gerald R. Ford. This is not a joke. A set of emails was obtained by NPR, a U.S. public broadcasting group, revealing that toilet wars have broken out on board the most expensive ship the U.S. Navy ever built.
They are fighting each other just to use the bathroom, hand-to-hand combat, knife battles, gun battles. Now they are fighting on the U.S. warship because it's taking hours in line just to use the bathroom. What?
And the Wall Street Journal followed up to confirm the tale today. TLDR summary: there are too few functioning toilets for 4,600 sailors, and the problem is worsening daily. Problem 1, design planners screwed up by including too few toilets for 4,000 plus sailors, leading to 45-minute queues on a daily basis. Problem 2, engineers screwed up by installing a fragile vacuum system in which a single valve breakdown on one toilet can stop all the toilets in an entire department functioning, making the queues even longer. Problem 3, some of the temporary repair operations, such as using an acid flush to clear out calcium buildups, can only be done while the ship is docked. No prospect of that. But with so many toilets out of order, too much pressure is put on the ones still working, so the problem will just spread. And the issues have already been mounting for more than a year.
It's a big problem, ladies and gentlemen. It's not the first time, and it's not malfunctioning to do with general engineering or arms or anything as such, but the toilets, that's a huge problem. What are they going to do now? They didn't expect that to happen. Is that going to be delaying an attack, or is the United States going to manage somehow with its...
The shooting ain't even started. What are they gonna do when the shooting start? Huh? It ain't no time to use no goddamn bathroom because you're fighting for your life. This is a joke. You see? This is a joke. This is the most advanced aircraft carrier in the world. And they don't even have enough bathrooms on there for the people. So they got them very angry. They wondering why they're there. They don't want to die. They know they're not just going to be able to, beat up on them like it's Libya. This is starting mutiny.
Its personnel, 4,000 to 5,000 on USS Gerald Ford, not going to the toilet for a very long time. That's a very interesting development that happened here.
That's crazy.
The second interesting development is that Donald Trump now is facing problems internally, not surprisingly as well, from his top general.
Oh, this is very important. Now you see the soldiers. That's why I said this. That's why I started this name. This mutiny. You have the soldiers. This the war fighters. They upset. They're already putting their life on the line, and their basic accommodations, like using a bathroom, it takes 45 minutes. Do you know some of them people done pissed on? You know they done pissed on themselves. You know them people, man, they are upset. And guess what? The only thing facing them is war. So it don't get no better. Then you have so that's the war fighters. Then you have the top generals telling Trump this is not a good idea, because they know all those generals in the Middle East, they finna earn their keep now. You ain't gonna be sitting in bunkers and sitting in certain buildings. No, you part of the fight. The generals don't want to die. They're saying, hey, we need to rethink this. But Trump don't get to rethink anything.
Warning from a war against Iran. According to a report, General Dan Kane has advised caution on possible attack amid fears of retaliatory strikes. The military and security establishment in the United States that isn't politically motivated or isn't attached to a certain group or an ideology, they would say things as they are, because they know. As a matter of fact, the Secret Service told Trump last year that Iran isn't looking for a nuclear bomb. And Donald Trump at that time was very angry with them and tried to suppress that report. So there is knowledge amongst the people who want to know, because it would be naive and absurd for the relevant bodies not to know, unless, of course, they are politically motivated, funded by a certain group, and pushed by the Zionists like Donald Trump. Now, what is the general warning from? He's warning from huge retaliation coming from Iran and from a prolonged conflict. From their perspective, a prolonged conflict isn't in the best interest of the United States of America, not only because of the risks of the personnel, but also because of the lack of capability. The United States doesn't have the capacity to manufacture weapons to a level where it could sustain an ongoing war against Iran with the scale and level required, and with the scope, how far it would spread. Are they going to be ready for all of these adventures happening there, with further Iranian preparations that we will be talking about hopefully in the next video, and the strategy of Iran to take down any attempt coming from the United States? Now, Donald Trump officially is downplaying this report, and he's saying no problem whatsoever. He's downplaying the report of the division. Mr. saying now everyone is on my side in relation to an attack against Iran. There are no problems. According to this report, Donald Trump said that these reports were 100% incorrect.
They don't want to.
That's not true whatsoever. Of course, whenever something is, against Donald Trump's will, offends his Zionist masters, he will go and tell you, no, there's no truth behind it whatsoever. And it isn't just that the United States isn't prepared to attack Iran militarily at that large scale, although Trump has the capacity as the main decision maker. He is the man who makes the decisions. the army will listen to Trump, whether they're prepared or not, like what happened in Israel. Despite the army telling the political echelon, no, don't do this and that, don't go that far, Netanyahu didn't listen. That's where things get very dangerous, when the political level and the political establishment doesn't listen to the military establishment and undermine everyone in the military or security or intelligence establishments about the repercussions of such war alongside other departments in the government, because any war has repercussions beyond economic or military measures or losses of life. There's the image, there's the diplomatic problems, economic issues, everything. And that's not just on the military side from the United States of America, it's also from a diplomatic perspective. From a diplomatic perspective, the United States is becoming a weaker country. It doesn't have the same leverage it used to have before. Countries are not respecting the United States the same way they used to. The United States isn't able to impose everything at once the same way it did before, to a level where traditional allies are shifting away, having their own alliances. Talks about a Middle East pact. Saudi Arabia has a pact with Pakistan. Turkey is calling for a bigger defense pact. Iran even has more ties with Saudi Arabia. But the most recent thing that happened is that several decades after breaking the ties, Egypt and Iran are looking to restore full diplomatic relations. The problems between Egypt and Iran started when the previous and late Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat housed the Shah when he was ousted by the Iranian people following the 1979 revolution. He went to Egypt. Egypt took care of him. He sought shelter in Egypt. Everything was fine there. Iran didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that they took a man who they ousted, and in what Iranians view as a revolution for the people, and Egypt is taking sides with them. This led to tensions, escalating tensions. That was slightly changed with the election of the previous and also late president, who was most likely assassinated in prison, Mohammed Morsi of Egypt, who was the first Egyptian president to visit Iran in a very long time during his term in the early 2010s. He went to Iran, and the Iranian president at the time, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, visited Egypt too. That changed again with the coup that happened that led to General Sisi taking over. And now we are looking for something new, and they're talking about restoring the diplomatic ties. According to this report and other reports,
Egypt is a puppet.
We're talking about the final preparations. So the final preparations before restoring full diplomatic ties. What does that mean from a geopolitical perspective and from a broader perspective too? That means that the policy of the United States to divide the countries of the region and keep that hostility ongoing by lobbying towards more hostile actions against Iran because of their position against Israel isn't really working anymore. Iran is changing its foreign policy as well, with some of the Arab countries too. The Arab countries are realizing who the real enemy is. The statements of Mike Huckabee about Israel, or him being okay with Israel taking over the whole Middle East, is shaking up some of the Arab establishments who constantly relied on American support. And it's showing them that even if the United States has good relations with you, even if you buy trillions worth of weapons from the United States, even if you have certain agreements in place with the United States, nothing works as long as Israel has the right to do whatever it wants. Everyone saw what Israel did to Qatar. They've launched many threats to occupy more countries. Netanyahu showed his empathy and connection to the idea of Greater Israel, and we have a messianic psychopathic ambassador of the United States in Israel, Mike Huckabee, saying that there's no problem in them actually taking over all of these territories. Now, all of these movements that are happening now could push the United States, or could be part of the reason that the United States actually wants a war. Because they realize if they leave things to be, they will only get weaker and weaker. And they will inevitably lose control, and you will see things happening just at a slower pace and without necessarily having too much wars or bloodshed. But that's not the vision that the Zionists want. The Zionists know that whenever there is prosperity with nations, wherever there is a translation of the will of the people, or more coordination or economic ties, prosperity, security, safety, freedoms for the people of the region and the countries of the region surrounding Israel, that would harm Israel. They don't like that. They want weak countries, divided countries, spread into multiple ethnicities and groups that they can control based on what they want, and they have the superiority in the region. And with an administration in the United States in the form of Donald Trump's administration, it's likely that they will cater to those Israeli demands and ambitions rather than go against them.
Reports staring at a strategic crossroads, reports of internal caution are shaking up the Iran debate, with signals that America's top military leadership, General Daniel Kaine, has flagged operational risks. Questions over munitions gaps, allied backing, and battlefield exposure are now colliding with political resolve. Is the march toward confrontation hitting resistance from within? The spotlight is on the Pentagon. Concerns about preparedness and the cost of escalation are surfacing at the highest levels. The warning is not about weakness, but about calculation. The price of striking Iran without airtight logistics or coalition muscle. The risk matrix, insiders suggest, is anything but simple.
Numerous stories from the fake news media have been circulating stating that General Daniel Kaine, sometimes referred to as Razin, is against us going to war with Iran. The story does not attribute this vast wealth of knowledge to anyone and is 100% incorrect. General Kane, like all of us, would like not to see war, but if a decision is made on going against Iran at a military level, it is his opinion that it will be something easily won.
President Trump has forcefully dismissed suggestions of division, asserting command authority and projecting confidence in a swift outcome. He insists the final call rests with him. The messaging is clear: strength, decisiveness, and leverage. But the diplomatic temperature beyond Washington tells a different story.
Yes, the situation in Iran, of course, is very intense. So we don't need another war in this region. We already have a lot. So we have stressed the diplomatic way out of this. So we are also willing to contribute. And it's not only the nuclear issue, but it's also the ballistic missile program and the other worries we have with Iran. It is true that Iran is at its weakest point that they have been. We should be really using this time to find a diplomatic solution.
Europe is urging restraint. The emphasis is on diplomacy, timing, and preventing another regional inferno. Brussels is signaling that escalation now could fracture fragile stability. The divide is no longer just about Iran. It is about strategy, sequencing, and the appetite for another high-stakes conflict. So the big question lingers. Is this a moment of unified resolve or strategic divergence? With military caution, presidential confidence, and European pushback converging, the Iran equation has become a test of alignment. The next move will not just shape US-Iran ties, it could redefine transatlantic unity itself.
A very sound case.
Nathan Watkins doesn't believe in limits, especially limits on your property taxes.
Now, I know the Americans don't have royalty. Why should they? They kicked it out by revolutionary means. But if they did, this young man would definitely be the crown prince. Jackson Hinkle, US-based political analyst and host of the wonderful Legitimate Targets. Speaking of legitimate targets, Jackson, someone tried to kill Donald Trump again this afternoon at Mar-a-Lago. He wasn't there, but it's a sign of the rising temperature in the United States, isn't it?
Well, thanks for having me on again, George. Frankly, I don't believe anything that comes out of the mainstream media anymore. I don't know what to make of it. Could it have happened? I mean, possibly. Someone was surely arrested. Someone came into the property. But really, it all seems like a giant psyop now. What's not a giant psyop is that, well, there was a group of people who were discussing the idea of going to visit Iran recently. I was among them, and there were tangible threats against that group of people who were considering to make a trek there as a last-ditch effort to try and stop war against Iran, a war that's surely going to bring about the loss of life of thousands of American troops if they do decide to try and enter Iran. So those are the real threats. And obviously, there's a target on your back and Max Blumenthal's back as well. Anyone who tells the truth. Trump, I think he's safeguarded by Miriam Adelson. I think he's safeguarded by Peter Thiel and all the rest of the Zionist genocidal freaks that control the apparatus in the United States today.
Yeah, but our friend Tucker, who wreaked such devastation on the cause of Christian Zionism, on the cause of the Israel lobby, and let's face it, on the cause of the current administration, with the simple act of being a journalist this week by interviewing Mike Huckabee to such devastating effect. It was amazing. Just ordinary, honest journalism. It impacted like a nuclear device.
And even before, as you know, he did that interview, he said that Netanyahu had personally attacked the safety of two of his family members prior to even going to Israel. So that's how serious of a threat it is when Americans and citizens of the UK and other Western nations are speaking out against our own governments and the crimes that they're committing. Tucker, you'd think someone like him is untouchable, given how close he is still, I guess, as a maybe a friend. I don't know what you can call it, an acquaintance of the president of the United States. Surely a man with very, very high ratings in regard to the American public. The American public love him, so Trump probably wants to try and keep him in his good graces. But even that's not enough, because he goes to Israel. He can't even set foot in the country outside of the airport because they had all these machinations, these plans. They were going to stage all these Hasbara PSYOP campaigns around him setting one single foot into the country. And that's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is he wouldn't actually make it back out of the country. And that's a very plausible scenario that could have taken place as well. But that interview was, I think Mike Huckabee's, the ambassador's Twitter account, speaks for itself in the days after the interview. I mean, he's senselessly tweeting out multi-page essays that he concocted through some sort of Ben Shapiro, Hasbara, ChatGPT, AI chatbot. And he's just losing his mind, all because it was exposed in 4K exactly what the Christian Zionists, the evangelical Zionists in America really think about Zionism.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just that they're wrong, is it, Jackson? It's that they're unbelievably stupid. I mean, the thesis that all this land, not just Israel plus Palestine occupied in 67, but an Israel that stretches from the River Nile to the Euphrates River in Iraq, taking all of Jordan, taking Lebanon, taking part of Saudi Arabia and all of Iraq, that this country is this is the sacred cause of a whole tranche of American politicians and policymakers. And as I saw someone from the Dakota tribe of the original Americans make the point, why are we giving billions to Israel for infrastructure when the Dakota people, the original owners of the land, don't even have drinkable water? The extent of the occupation of American political life by these evangelical idiots like Huckabee and their controllers in Israel is truly staggering, isn't it?
It's important to remember 870 days ago, we were all sold the lie. 40 beheaded babies, this, that, and the third. Somehow a group of riflemen on paragliders caused thousands of automobiles in Israel to have become impaled. Their roofs are caved in. They're all burnt out. I don't know how that magically happens by a group of paragliders, but they wanted us to believe that. There's been no evidence of any of those claims and who they allege to have carried them out since that took place on October 7, 2023. And at the time, there were some people saying, wow, Israel is going to really rain hell down upon who they are blaming for this. We all know that now. And this could spiral into a giant conflict in the Middle East. We were called crazy conspiracy theorists, even anti-Semitic, for saying that simple fact. I think people were even making fun of Scott Ritter when he said that back then this could turn into a major regional war with Iran. But 870 days later, we are there. And as you pointed out, the only thing that we have to be thankful for right now is that our enemies are as stupid as they are. Because at this point in time, as we've witnessed all of this, we've witnessed all these lies, you have people on all sides of the political spectrum in the United States who now hold the same exact positions on these issues. They're all coming around to where you and I and Jimmy Dore and Max Blumenthal and Tucker Carlson have been on these issues for some time. And now that we all agree on these sets of issues, what comes next? I think the obvious conclusion is that there must be an anti-Epstein coalition of political parties, political figures that don't join necessarily in one giant party that agrees on everything, but we definitely know what needs to come to an end, and that's the endless support for Israel. That's American and British imperialism, and that's a huge threat. So I say thank you to our enemies for being as stupid as you are, because you've really woken a lot of people up.
They sure have. And I never thought I'd live to see this day when a clear majority of the American people disapprove of America's relationship to Israel. Moving back to the war, John Kiriakou, a man well worthy of respect, CIA whistleblower, man who served time in a penitentiary for telling us the truth about his former employers. He says it's Monday or Tuesday. Max Blumenthal, in an interview just a few minutes ago, made a very sound case for why it has to happen soon and quick so that it's all over, they hope, by the time people start arriving for the FIFA World Cup. It kind of has to be now. Is it going to be, in your view?
It doesn't matter when it happens. If they try to do anything that's going to be shock and awe level destruction, they're going to get dragged into this by, the next time America would be considered for hosting the FIFA World Cup. This is not going to be a quick operation. Maybe they tried to do something that's, very artificial, maybe just for the red meats that Trump must offer the Zionist donor base. But I don't even know if that's possible at this point. The Iranians have been very clear, and a lot of Iranians, like conservative lawmaker, principlist lawmaker, Dr. Amir Hossein Sabiti, he was the campaign manager for the runner-up, Saeed Jalili, in the last presidential elections. They're saying, why are we even negotiating? These are what Iranian patriots, hardcore guys, are saying. Why are we even negotiating right now? They're talking about preemptive strikes. They're saying, look at Venezuela. How did waiting around work for Venezuela? Meanwhile, if there were warships off of North Korea's coast, does anyone think that North Korea would wait around and see what happens? No, of course not. So Trump is backed into a very, very dark corner. I can't imagine what is going through his mind right now. I'm sure he would love an off-ramp, but it does appear as though we're about to see something big. We haven't had this many U.S. military assets in the region since, I guess, 2003. 1/5 of all U.S. Air Force 5th generation fighter jets are in the region. All of the top-level air defense that didn't seem to work too well in the 12-day war are at every single base there. And also we have 2/3 of the U.S. Navy either there or very soon to be there. It's en route right now, the USS Gerald Ford, which is the most powerful carrier strike group that the U.S. has to offer. But those can sink just like any other ship on the face of the planet. And the Iranians have been very clear to point that out.
Well, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And they seem to be, if I can use a George W. Bushism, misunderestimating Iran's resolve and its capacity. One hypersonic missile, which is undefendable against, landing in the middle of one of those aircraft carriers, could sink billions of dollars worth, and more importantly, hundreds, maybe thousands of American sailors. Is the American public not concerned about that?
Well, it's worth noting that the majority of the American public is opposed to war against Iran, not at the high numbers we saw in opposition to war on Venezuela, but they're still opposed to war against Iran. I mean, you just have to spend 5 minutes in America to know that even our most prestigious so-called American cities are all falling apart. As you mentioned, people don't have access to either electricity, water in some parts of America still. Our cities, the infrastructure is falling apart, trains crashing, planes falling out of the sky. Our ships, not even our warships, just our cargo ships are crashing into one another, crashing into bridges. I mean, now would be the time to say, hey, China is beating us basically everywhere across the world. Their economy is about 5-6 trillion larger than ours when you account for GDP, purchasing power parity. They're the number one import-export trade partner for many nations across the world. And they've done all of this in the past, 2 decades or so. Maybe we should focus on actually rebuilding America rather than building a bunch of coffins and body bags that are going to be storing the corpses of U.S. soldiers that were potentially lucky enough to bring back home. The truth and reality is most of them are either going to be buried in Iran or they're going to be sinking to the bottom of the ocean. God forbid that happens. God forbid we get to that point. But that is a sincere possibility here.
Now, for obvious reasons, I'm the last man to give 3 cheers to the British police. But I'll give them 2 cheers for marching into a royal castle and carting off the former Duke of York, who had 10,000 men once upon a time, but is now friendless. The Duke of York, as was the Andrew formerly known as Prince, was held in a police cell for 12 hours and questioned about his relationship to Jeffrey Epstein. The former Prime Minister of Norway is under arrest and in custody for corrupt practices while in office relating to Jeffrey Epstein. The queens and princes of multiple European countries are being disgraced, and top officials of various international organizations are having to hand in their resignations. When can we expect to see some heads rolling in the United States over the Epstein affair?
Well, I almost wonder if maybe everyone just hated Prince Andrew at these island parties that they were throwing with the jerky and whatnot. And maybe they said, look, someone has to take the fall. It's going to be him. We didn't. Maybe that's a little bit of what's going on right now, because as you mentioned, there's not even a peep about that happening in the United States for much of anyone. When you look at this Epstein class, this Epstein regime, obviously this is a distinct political class. This is an economic class. And it sounds really disgusting and gross, but they are going to defend their interests, as you know, just in the same way that workers should be defending their interests, right? The bottom line of the Epstein regime is to make sure that none of them go to prison for eating human beings and trafficking underage people all across the world. That it's just disgusting. It's demonic, but that is their end goal. And they're doing a pretty good job of it. I mean, nothing is being discussed. No one is being outed. They're still saying that this was the final batch of files that they had to release. But a few weeks ago, Pam Bondi said that there was 6 million files that had yet to be released. So where are the 2-3 million remaining files, and what's in those? Whose names are in those? I can't imagine it's a pretty picture for Lutnick or for Donald Trump or for any of their friends. But like I said, they're going to pull out every single trick in the book to try and protect each other. And frankly, I don't even believe at all that body that the autopsy was done onto was Epstein's body. The ears don't match. The nose doesn't match. Ghislaine Maxwell, she looks like the new photos of her from prison, she looks like one of those like Iranian monarchist lesbians that you see walking around Orange County, California. It doesn't look like Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter of British royalty or business royalty. It's just, I don't buy any of it. It's all fake.
Well, I mean, once upon a time, that would have sounded like a crazy thing to say. But as I pointed out last week, the person who appeared before the Congressional Committee by camera was definitely not Ghislaine Maxwell. I know Ghislaine Maxwell. And however much prison pasta can put on the pounds, it can't change the gap between your eyes. It can't change the shape of your nose. That was not Ghislaine Maxwell. So if that's not Ghislaine Maxwell in the prison, why should we believe that Jeffrey Epstein died in the prison? The two of them might be together on an island somewhere, perhaps.
Perhaps indeed. And maybe, you know, it's not all that nice of an island. So Trump now has to launch some sort of a war against Cuba. And then they'll get like a way bigger Little St. James Island, and they'll turn Cuba back into this trafficking ring with prostitution running rampant, and American billionaires having the opportunity to buy or luxury homes for pennies on the dollar and basically have a slave class that serves to their every need. I think that's what they want for Cuba. That's probably the goal.
Yeah, half the year they can spend in Gaza, the other half in Cuba, having turned both of them into bordellos and casinos and condominiums. But they're all caught lying through their teeth. Bill Gates I just looked at an interview he gave in 2019. He scarcely knew Jeffrey Epstein. But this latest tranche shows that he had years and years and years of the closest possible business and personal relationship. Howard Lutnick said that he cut ties with Jeffrey Epstein in 2005 after his conviction, but he was visiting him on the island more than a decade later, and also deeply involved in business relations with Epstein throughout, conviction or no conviction. And he's still in your government. He's the Commerce Secretary.
Well, yes. And as you know, when we have people on our shows, even for a 15-minute conversation, we do our due diligence. We make sure that, maybe a person was suggested to us. We check them out. We look online. We try to get an understanding of who this person is that we're going to invite on our program. I'd have to imagine that if you're doing, multi-$100,000 deals or $1 million plus deals with a random guy, you'd be doing your due diligence. And that's why I was so disgusted, specifically that, the names you mentioned, of course, there's plenty of reasons to be disgusted by Bill Gates and Howard Lutnick and all the things that they've done. Most recently of which this whole tariff scheme that Lutnick is going to be making billions and billions of dollars off of. But even more so, people like Noam Chomsky, who champion themselves as the upper echelon of moral clarity. And really, what is he? He's a guy who behind the scenes was knowingly palling around with Jeffrey Epstein. Him and his wife were, and they were saying that, Jeffrey, you're our favorite person. You're our best friend. You're our favorite person in the world. Those new emails from Chomsky's wife showed that this week. And they were moving a lot of money for the Chomskys, Epstein was. And also, he was meeting with Ehud Barak. Ehud Barak and Chomsky, they're all meeting together while Chomsky was telling all of us on the outside that, yes, sure, the situation in Gaza is very sad, but you all need to stop the boycott, divest, sanction movement because it's not going to get you anywhere. So now we understand why he had these weird political views, these backward political views. Same thing when Jimmy Dore was fighting for Medicare for all, universal health care in the United States at the start of the pandemic. And Noam Chomsky told all of us when we were protesting outside the Capitol on January 2nd and 3rd of 2021, when the House was taking a vote on whether or not they'd make Pelosi speaker, Noam Chomsky told all of us that we're like spoiled children asking for cookies when we know we've done something wrong. So it's exposed a lot of people. And frankly, I'm very pleased to see what's come out of this all. But I am even more interested in what is remaining in the extra 2 million files that are still somewhere collecting dust on Pam Bondi and Kosh Patel's desk.
Yeah, you and me both. Lastly, though it's a big question, Jackson, you mentioned the negotiations. You mentioned Witkoff. Witkoff is deeply involved. Him and Kushner, highly qualified, of course, as real estate men in diplomacy. They are the key negotiators on two fronts, on the Russian front and on the Iranian front. Now, we know that they are lying on a Goebbelian scale in relation to Iran. Witkoff himself, just today, said that Iran is 1 week away from developing a nuclear weapon. Not 8 days, not 6, 1 week away. This is a fantastic lie. So why should we believe that Witkoff is telling the truth to President Putin? How can we trust Kushner and Witkoff on Russia when we know what they're doing on Iran?
Well, the good news is, I guess it doesn't really matter to either of us because there are very fine leaders in both these countries who I think understand the BS that's being peddled in their direction. And, you know, the Russian negotiations, as you know, have been they've been very quiet. It's been a key demand of the Russians from every facet of the Russian government that these negotiations, and specifically what was discussed in Alaska, need to be kept quiet for them to have any chances of, being successful. That being said, I don't really necessarily believe that the Russians and the Iranians, and this is just my opinion, I'm not speaking with any knowledge of the situation, but I don't think that they really care all that much whether these are successful negotiations. The Russians are moving forward on all, sections of the front line. They're doing very well. The Americans want to offer a bunch of slop at the Russian doorstep and think that for some reason they are in dire need of making a concession or many concessions to the United States. Same with the Iranians. Why should Iran, after they exhibited their extremely impressive and unexpected for many strength in Operation True Promise 2 and the 12-day war, why should they accept any more concessions, specifically a deal that would be worse than the JCPOA? The JCPOA was terrible for Iran. Why now should they accept something even worse? It makes no sense to me. I think the Russians, they're approaching this as very pragmatic people, and maybe there's good things they can take out of this and some bad things that they don't like about it. The Iranians, I think that they're just buying time as they solidify all their nuclear sites and air defense systems. And I think they're very smart to do it. Unfortunately, I think that maybe the U.S. is beginning to realize that they're not fooling anyone this time around, and it's time to start the war. I think we're about to see it.
Switch to TurboTax.
Said about the ongoing conflict between Iran and the United States. Here is what he said.
Have to expect that if they do not truly come to the table and truly make serious concessions, that they're going to see how defenseless they are against attack from the air. Keeping in mind that the Israelis, using U.S.-provided F-35 stealth fighter bombers, took out the supposedly sophisticated Russian S-300 air and ballistic missile defense system that Iran had, provided again by Russia, and then other air defense batteries and systems that they had. So again, if you fly above, say, certainly 12,000 maybe a bit higher, again, Iran really can't touch them.
Yeah.
FAFO, fuck around, find out.
Yeah.
You know, the only thing I wish is that Petraeus had his butt sitting in one of the cockpits of those planes as they, quote, fly into Iran. Because, you know, one of the big lies about the June 13th attack and the disablement of some of Iran's air defense systems last June, they were not done by aircraft that flew into Iran. It was done by sabotage groups on the ground. So there really is, we've not seen any credible evidence that Israeli aircraft actually penetrated and flew and had air supremacy inside Iran. So that's, you know, there's another myth that they continue to perpetuate. But it is pay attention to Petraeus, because he's not just offering his opinion. He is reflecting the belief of the U.S. intelligence community. They really believe this nonsense. So, you know, we'll find out. But I was listening, I was on Judge Napolitano's show half hour ago before coming on here. And he played a clip from Trita Parsi. Now, I think Trita's a good analyst in general, but Trita said, he made this statement, and maybe it was just he didn't intend to say this, but what he said was that Iran is weaker today than it was 2 years ago. And I'm looking, I said, well, you know, what planet are you living on, my brother? I would argue right now, militarily, Iran is stronger than it's ever been in its history. And that's because Iran swallowed its pride and sought help from Russia and China, who were more than willing to provide assistance and have. And whether it's providing radar, whether it's providing augmented air defense systems on the ground, you know, Petraeus speaks derisively of the S-300 capability, when the S-300 surpasses anything the Patriot missile system could do. But the S-400 is in an entirely different league. So if the West persists with this presumption that Iran's weak and they can't stop us, and our F-35s are the best in the world, you know what? These you know, $100 million hangar queens are just, you know, they're not as good or capable as we like to think. I mean, just by comparison, the Russian Su-35, which is, you know, the comparable fifth generation fighter plane that Russia flies, has almost twice the range that an F-35 does. Ditto for the Chinese J-20. So, but, you know, the United States is walking around, oh, man, we're so proud. You know, we're so good. And we've not really been tested in combat up against somebody that can punch back. And while I really hope we don't, you know, test that capability and go to war with Iran, if we do, I anticipate that the United States is in for a very rude awakening. It'll be shocking. We'll be shocked at how poorly we performed.
Do you want to build an app and you're not a developer? Well, let me show you how to build it with JotForm apps. In this video, we're going to cover from
Let me, since you mentioned the name of Trita Parsi here, he's a quite interesting character, Larry, to me, because he doesn't know anything about the military of Iran, the power that they possess today. And what he always commenting on that Iran is less capable and they're weaker than they were before. Even he said something so amazing to me, that Iran today is much more, you know, the society is much more under pressure than it was 20 years ago. When he's talking about the freedom, you know, these kids, that the way that they want to live. And He's just making lies after lies, Larry. I don't know why is he doing, what is his purpose of making these sort of comments. He doesn't know a single, I would say, an angstrom, a little, an iota about what's going on in Iran.
Well,
and
he gets
Larry,
paid.
I was out of Iran for 12 years. And when I got there, I couldn't believe the change that I've been witnessing in the society.
Yeah.
You cannot, if you go to Iran, you see the level of discussions in Iran, political discussions in Iran. You would say, so what are we talking about outside? You see the worst, critics of Iranian government comes from inside Iran. You cannot find it outside. And Trita is somehow 20 years ago and today. I don't know why is he seeking for, what is his purpose. But after all, these are, the same sort of, I would argue that these are connected with neoliberals in the United States. That's why he's trying to keep in that, ilk, to be part of that ilk. That's why he's making these sort of outrageous comments when it comes to the military, when it comes to the intelligence, when it comes to the society, Iranian society. And
well, see, look, I do what I do not to get paid. Not, I'm not making money hand over fist with this at all. In fact, you can make the case that I've been hurt financially because of it. But if I sought a job at a think tank and said, look, I'm going to give you my objective analysis, and we'll start with facts, like the claim that Iran is the #1 sponsor of terrorism. Okay. Show me the incidents. Who are the most active terrorist groups in the world today? And the State Department and French think tank Fondalab, they show that all of the especially if you measure it in terms of who's causing the most casualties, who's killing and wounding the most, they're all Sunni groups. They're not Hamas and Hezbollah. They're not groups that Iran has no tie with them whatsoever. And so if I went out to a think tank and said, we're going to put that out, they'd say, oh, no, because it would upset their donors. Their donors want a propaganda that portrays Iran in the worst possible light. And they keep talking about the extremism of the mullahs. Now, back in well before you were born, or just shortly, just prior to you coming into this world, in 1980, 81, 82, there were some extreme acts, and the religious police are cracking down, and women had to wear the hijab, and Iran sort of created an image of itself as an intolerant place, but that's not the case now, and it has one of the criticisms that have been reflected in some of the legitimate polls that have been done is that people wanted let's ease up on all these Islamic restrictions on dress, etc., and they've done that, and so the West refuses to come to grips with what Iran is today. But particularly when we look at the first 25 years of this century, of the 21st century, it has been about combating terrorism. The terrorism has been carried out by Sunni extremist groups that have been funded in part by the West. I mean, it goes back to the CIA funding for these radical Sunni groups in Pakistan that then were subsequently used by the United States to attack Russia in the late 1990s with the Second Chechen War, and have continued to have relationships with these groups, including, the most recent example was Hayat Tahrir al-Sham with al-Jalani, now al-Shara. And, this is a group directly tied to ISIS. It's gone through some evolutions, but nonetheless, it's still an ISIS quality group. And here's the United States funding it, aiding it, while Iran is fighting against, through the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command, the IRGC, are fighting against those radical Islamists. We're fighting in Syria. I mean, in the real world, the United States should have been allied with Iran because we shared a common goal: eliminate these radical Sunnis who are intolerant of other people. You know, the Iranian, the Shia Islam that is practiced by and upheld by the mullahs is not one that goes out to tell people you got to convert or die. You know, that has been the reputation of some of these Salafists and Takfiris, but not Iran. But again, the West refuses to deal with that, and that's where it's unfortunate. Trita sort of plays into that mythology instead of challenging it and really blowing the whistle on it. Because I'm happy to take anybody on with respect to the issue of terrorism. You know, we want to go back and you know, they try to pretend that Iran is responsible for the deaths of thousands of Americans. Absolutely not true. Provably false. But again, nobody wants to deal. When you confront them with the facts, they go off on some other tangent.
Yeah. And Larry, we had the Iranian foreign minister Arakchi having an interview and talking. He was asked about the current phase of, you know, negotiations, the current situation with the negotiation on the part of Iranian and how they feel about this situation. And here is what Arakchi said in terms of preparing, you know, the terms that Iran would agree on with the negotiation with the United States.
President Trump trusts retired teacher Terry Leo Wilson because she's teaching liberals a lesson in Austin. Leo.
President Trump plans to strike Iran, or is he using this threat as leverage?
Well, I'm not, I cannot judge, but one fact is that if they want to find a resolution for Iran's peaceful nuclear program, the only way is diplomacy. And we have proved this in the past, and I believe that still there is a good chance to have a diplomatic solution, which is based on a win-win game, and a solution is at our reach. So there is no need for any military buildup, and military buildup cannot help it and cannot pressurize us.
Yeah. Here is what he said, and what we've heard from Steve Witkoff yesterday. And he was mentioning that the president of the United States is somehow frustrated with Iran. He's preparing to receive some sort of proposal from Iranians, and he didn't receive it so far. And they don't capitulate. He used the term capitulation, that Iran needs to capitulate to Donald Trump. Putting these two concepts together, Larry, are we heading toward a war? What is your assessment? Because I don't see Iran capitulating to anybody. And on the other hand, Donald Trump wants some sort of capitulation. Is that going to be the sort of capitulation that Donald Trump has achieved against Houthis in the Red Sea, or are we going to have a new war between Iran and the United States?
I think the war is inevitable because of the size of the combat, the air combat force that has been deployed to the region. Now, the fact that there are two carrier strike groups in the region, you know, they're really not important either strategically or tactically. They're actually more of a burden, because if they get close enough, you know, the one that's in the Mediterranean is there, I guess, in theory, to try to provide protection for Israel in the event that Iran launches ballistic missiles and drones against Israel, as it did last June.
Revolutionary salute to our brother Blockbuster 35 for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. You know, I absolutely appreciate the love, family. So,
the other ship, the Abraham Lincoln, which is off the coast of Iran, quite a ways off the coast. Again, the weapons it has on board, both with its planes, the 10 F-35s, and the destroyers, the ability to launch Tomahawk cruise missiles, to have any effect in the interior of Iran, we require those ships to get, close, within 200 miles of the coast. Well, once they do that, they're extremely vulnerable to Iranian missile attacks, because Iran's anti-ship missiles are now my understanding is they're now integrated with Chinese satellites. So it's actually quite easy to pinpoint where those ships are and to take them out. That leaves the land-based F-35s, which are in places like, which are principally in Saudi Arabia and Jordan. Now, we saw Tucker Carlson's interview with Mike Huckabee, in which Huckabee basically said, hey, Israel can take all of the Middle East. Screw Jordan, screw Syria, screw Turkey, screw, Iraq, etc. And man, that set off, I'll call it the equivalent of a nuclear bomb among all of the Arab Muslim nations in that region. And the reason I raised this is you had Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. They were both signed on to it. Both of them pissed off. They hate each other right now. But, let's call Huckabee the great uniter. He even brought them together. So it raises the question does that anger translate into Jordan and Saudi Arabia telling the United States, no, you're not, no, get your damn aircraft out of here. You're not going to fly from here. That's a possibility. At least, I haven't seen any movement in that direction, but you can't discount that as a possibility. Does and the United States persists under this belief that with air power, we can defeat Iran. We can cause such damage that Iran won't be able to function. All right, I ask everybody to take a step back, take the United States and Iran out of the equation. Let's make it Russia and Ukraine. Look at all of the missiles that Russia has fired into Ukraine over the last 4 years. I mean, incredible volumes. And yes, it's caused damage. It's caused destruction. But has Ukraine collapsed and given, we give up, no more, and Ukraine's basically got 1/5 the population of Iran. Iran is a landmass, I believe, is like 3 times the size of Ukraine. So it's like, everybody, wake up and stop deluding yourselves that you think the United States can launch even 1,000 sorties and that's going to force the Iranians to collapse. Is not going to happen. And then you get into the issue of the maintenance on these F-35s and their ability to perform and sustain combat operations. It is the United States has convinced itself that it's a 10-foot tall giant with unlimited capabilities, and in fact, we only stand about we're more like a dwarf. We're shorter, and we're not nearly as physically capable as we think we are. So that's it's setting up for something that could be if the United States acts on this presumption, and I think I know that the military personnel were fully expecting that we would have attacked this last weekend. We didn't, and you can come up with there are a number of factors that intervened. One is my understanding is that Tulsi Gabbard and J.D. Vance both vociferously protested and lobbied against doing it, and Trump apparently listened. They were buttressed by a poll. I know the person that carried out a poll where they showed Trump that he would have no support, and that if he does this, the odds that the Republicans would lose the midterms and have no hope whatsoever of recovering is very high, and that he would be completely neutered and probably impeached and convicted. So then on top of that, the fact that there's only, right now, even with his quote base, 25% of Americans would support an attack on Iran. That means 75% don't.
Nathan Watkins doesn't believe in limits, especially limits on your property taxes. Watkins testified against Governor Abbott's property tax caps, saying,
"Tax caps are revenue caps."
Nathan Watkins, he's reckless and he'll leave you in his dust.
So it just, Trump is, they've manufactured a narrative that is not supported by the facts.
Larry, since you've mentioned the size of Iran, let me show a clip that shows it's could be for us and for our audience to understand the size of the country, Iran. Here is the video. It goes to the Europe. You see how much of Europe is covered by Iran.
Yeah.
And then goes to Canada, and then comes down to the United States. And many people saying that the state of Texas is much, much bigger than the state of Texas. It's not even comparable. And somehow Donald Trump feels that they can, Larry, what do you think that the Trump administration, what are the intelligence, what are the information on the Iranian air defense system, and what was Iran provided with by Chinese? Because so far it seems from what is in the mainstream media that we can monitor, that we've learned that China's YLC 8B, that call it YLC 8B radar, that gives Iran the power to detect stealth jets. When it comes to the F-35, which is the only fighter jet in that category.
Well, and let's deal with the geographic size issue. If you're in an F-35, you've got to fly from, let's say, Muwafaq Shati Air Base in Jordan, or from the air base in Saudi Arabia. So from Saudi Arabia, the air base there to Iran's border, western border, is I think about 200 miles. Okay, just let's do the math. The combat radius for an F-35 is 600 miles. So if you got to fly 200 miles and then you got another, does that mean they can fly in another 100 miles and then they have to turn around and come back? Or if there's a limit on how far the planes can go without being refueled. Well, you're not going to fly air refuelers over Iran. So that means they've got to be done over Saudi Arabia. And even then, we now know with the Chinese radar that you just mentioned, it can see out about 420 miles. And so anybody that's in that range, they can see it. And Iran does have surface-to-air missiles that can reach that far. So what you wind up with is these F-35s, even though we got 1,000 of them, want to hit 1,000 targets, they've got some real limits on how far they can fly into Iran. And the assumption is they can fly without being opposed. And I believe that one of the key developments that has been taking place and is still continuing is the deployment and training, the deployment of air defense systems with Russian and Chinese personnel both manning them in some cases, but also conducting training for Iranian forces. So I don't think, I know some military planners have recognized that the United States is going to suffer casualties. Question is how many? And when Trump is elected on the premise we're not going to get involved with stupid, meaningless wars in the Middle East, and then here he is getting ready to start a stupid, meaningless war. Right now the conventional wisdom in the United States is that the attack will come Wednesday, Thursday, or next weekend. Even though it's a full moon, even though U.S. military, Air Force planners don't want attacks to come in full moon when there's all that light. And nonetheless, that's what they're expecting. We'll see. I know that there are others intervening with Trump to say, hey, we can't afford to go to war with Iran. You can't. It'll destroy you politically. So we'll see if Trump's listening or not, because he is under enormous pressure from the Zionists.
The Zionists are mostly located in the United States, or they're from Israel as well. And I would, how do you see Israel in this calculation? It's all about the Zionists in the United States or outside the United States. They're having the leverage on Trump.
Well, I was going to say yes. It's both. It's not one or the other. And it's important. I've been accused of being an anti-Semite because I don't believe in Zionism. Now, I think I rank Zionism right up there with Nazism. It's an ethno-supremacy. It's basically saying we as a group who identify as Jewish, we are supreme and superior to everybody else, that we deserve rights that nobody else has, or at least like as it's conducted in Israel, they are a class above Palestinians and Christians. What in one of the things that came out of Tucker Carlson's recent interview with Mike Huckabee was Tucker said, hey, if you're Jewish, if you're genetically, you can show you're an Ashkenazi Jew and you convert to Christianity, the Israelis will not allow you into Israel because you're not kosher. And I thought, I'd never heard that. But I looked it up and it's absolutely true. So what it shows is that really Zionism is anti-Christian at its core. And yet you got so many Christians that are supporting it. And it's all really, it's built around a mythology. But nonetheless, it is a very powerful mythology that is continued to motivate and inspire this genocide that has been taking place against the Palestinians. It fundamentally, the real irony of all this is the father of Zionism as a concept is Theodore Herzl. Well,
he was atheist. Yeah,
he was atheist. I mean, the entire concept is all with Huckabee. Entire concept of Zionism about Israel's right to the land is based upon a belief that what we call the Old Testament, and I know I'll offend some of the religious listeners and watchers, but sorry, that the religious ones believe this was written by Moses. Moses had nothing else to do but sit down and write out a book. But the reality was what we know as Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Numbers, the first 5 books of the Bible which the Jews call the Torah. That was compiled by Jewish scholars who had been captured in the Babylonian exile back in around 550 BC. So we're talking almost 2,600 years ago. And they wrote this story out, and it's written from a Jewish perspective. So, like any author that writes something, It reflects your views, your values. But it has been invested by many Christians and many Jews as an authoritative, that this isn't something created by men. Oh, no. This is created by this deity. But then when you dig into it and look at what the deity says, it basically empowers the, quote, descendants of Abraham, who are through Isaac and Jacob. They're empowered to kill whoever they want that are in this land. That they are given special status that's above other people. Well, that's one of the contradictions in the Old Testament. We're led to believe, we're told to believe that God created all. God created male and female. Didn't create just one group of people, created all. And thou shalt not murder. And yet, then you got this other God that shows up. Yeah, go kill those Amaleks. They're in your land, kill them, wipe them out. Kill the men, the women, the children, the dogs, the animals, kill them all. I mean, that's in there. And and you see people like, here we are, the 21st century. And, you're watching Mike Huckabee, who's been a governor. He's not an uneducated man. But God, he says the most ridiculous nonsense to justify, oh, yeah, we got this, these people, these are God's special people. Which the essence, what his Christianity came out with was there are no special people. All people are special. All people are children of God. Yeah, that's a fairly unique concept within the various religions. That presenting a God that actually is concerned about all of humanity, just not one group. So that's where I say this whole Zionism thing is it's poisoned us, and it continues to be used as an excuse for murder and genocide.
Larry, let me bring on what Araghchi, the foreign minister of Iran, said about enrichment. And it's so amazing to me how he can keep calm when the reporter, she's asking outrageous questions. I was so furious. Just hear what he said.
President Trump consider allowing Iran to have even the smallest bit of enrichment?
Well, first of all, enrichment is our right. We are a member of NPT and we have every right to enjoy a peaceful nuclear energy, including enrichment. How we use this right is something related to us only. The enrichment is a sensitive part of our negotiation. The American team know about, they knows our position, we knows their position, and we have already exchanged our concerns. And I think a solution is achievable, but I'm not going to negotiate through media.
Yeah, she's talking about why the president of the United States should let Iran to enrich uranium, as though Donald Trump is the god.
Well, if I was advising the government of Iran about negotiations, I would start by saying, okay, we're going to stop with this intermediary crap that's going on where we talk to the Omani, and then he goes to the other room and talks to the Americans, and then he comes back and tells us what the Americans said. No, we're going to sit in the same room and we're going to talk. Now, if we can't do that, don't waste our time. And I would maintain that I think Iran is in a stronger position now to do that because of BRICS, because of Russia and China, because of the growing economic strength of Russia and China. 10 years ago, when JCPOA was signed, Iran did not have a lot of options. It didn't have somebody could go to say, oh, the West is trying to put all these sanctions on us. Can you help us find relief? Because back then, China and Russia were willing to back up those sanctions, but not now. Russia and China have made clear, no, we're not going to abide by those sanctions at all. So there is an economic road open for Iran that didn't exist even a year ago. That's, I think, one thing that people are failing to understand and appreciate. Iran now has economic options it didn't have before, and it has increased its military strength. It didn't stop building ballistic missiles even during the 12-day war. And, call them missile cities. I don't think Western intelligence fully comprehends or correctly assesses the number of ballistic missiles that Iran has and what their total capability is. And Iran has a variety of options for launching those in ways that the United States cannot stop. I mean, look, we do have historical evidence from 1990 during the first Gulf War, and then from 2003 about the inability of the United States Air Force and principally the Air Force to find, locate, and destroy ballistic missiles from the air. And let's add in that naval aviation. We just saw that recently, 8 months ago, in Yemen, that the United States went in there to destroy and disrupt and was unable to. Yeah, they caused some damage and they did some destruction, but nothing that completely hampered the Houthis from continuing to retaliate. And there's no comparison in terms of military capability of what Iran's can do versus what the Houthis could do. I mean, the Houthis are, brave fighters, but good Lord, they're like a child's, a baseball team, soccer team for children compared to professional soccer players. Iran's in a different league. And that's what I think the West fails to appreciate. So we keep telling ourselves, we tell us lies, sweet little lies, to take Fleetwood Mac out of context. But that's why if this goes to conflict, which I think it's likely, and again, I hope I'm wrong, that cooler heads will finally prevail on the U.S. side. But I think Iran candidly is wasting its time on these negotiations because the United States is not sincere. It's not about the enrichment. It's about the mullahs. It's about this religious society that is Iran. That is what has to be destroyed. We have to have a group of people in charge that are going to do what we tell them to do.
Я работаю педагогом-организатором в Карабашской обществе.
What's amazing about the perception of Iran on the part of the majorly mainstream media in the West, basically in the United States, is that they think that Iran is run by mullahs. And you see that in the calculation of the president of the United States, Donald Trump's talking about that he's going to assassinate the supreme leader of Iran and his son, for example.
Right.
So what difference that could bring to the table for you? And how can you get some sort of leverage by doing that? These are so much childish, Larry, when you think of Iran, that Iran is some sort of, clerics, mullahs running the show, the whole. Iran is one of the most sophisticated, Larry, systems that I've ever seen. The system is running the country. It's not some people, one guy, as they would call that, the supreme leader of Iran is running everything. Yeah. That's basically a total lie. If they go with that concept, that's gonna be devastating for their calculation, in my opinion.
Well, look, there's been an extensive disinformation campaign run by I believe it's ultimately run by the CIA, but it's using cutouts, and I think we talked about this briefly on Friday. A group out of the Netherlands called Gamaan, Gamaan, and then it's partnered up with a Canadian company that has a VPN. Well, when you look into the funding sources, what these companies are set up to do is to conduct polls over the internet, which they claim are much more objective, that people can respond anonymously, which is like, if you got them responding anonymously, how do you know that you're actually dealing with a person? But the information that comes out of those polls is that 80% of the Iranians hate the rule of the mullahs and want them gone and would welcome any new government. And so that is what the majority of people in the United States, the vast majority, believe. And the purpose of those polls, I believe, was not so much to persuade Iranians. It is to condition the West to justify attacking Iran. How many Iranians does the West claim have been killed in the protests? Do you know the number?
It was the West. They were talking about 30,000, 40,000, 80,000.
Yeah, but 30,000. Does that 30,000 number have any relevance back in the history of Iran, say under the rule of the Shah? Because my understanding is that in the year, the 12 months, 16 months before the Shah was overthrown, the number of Iranians that were actually killed by Savak and the Shah's enforcers was 30,000. Now, I don't believe that number that's being touted now is just, they've just picked it randomly. I believe it's a deliberate way to reflect back on the past to justify a current overthrow. But this belief, and you find it right now. Again, a couple of these Zionists, these crazed Zionists I've been dealing with, that they cite that to me. They've killed 30,000 people. Are you okay with that? And I always respond and say, well, that's half what the Jews have killed in Gaza. So, if you're not bothered by killing over 70,000 Palestinians and murdering men, women, and children, why should we get our hair on fire over just 30,000 in Iran? Oh, they don't like that.
Yeah.
Billionaires don't just influence politicians, they own them. That's why I don't take corporate PAC.
Yeah, it's Larry, how far, in your opinion, would Donald Trump go with the attack on Iran? Because in my understanding, as you mentioned, it seems that there are Russians and Chinese, I would say, operators in Iran to work with these weapons in the air defense systems, because they're integrating not only the Russian air defense system to the Chinese radars, but the integration is all around. But Iranian air defense system, Russia's air defense system, Chinese radars, and these are all communicating with each other. And how far Donald Trump would go if your assumption, your estimation is the attack is coming? And is it going to be because after all, Donald Trump is not going to be able to sustain the conflict more than 3 weeks or maybe 4 weeks. Then after that, what is he planning to do?
Well, if the West proceeds with the assumption that it can deliver a knockout blow and that Iran will lay down and give up, that I think is a false assumption. Now, I don't know how far the assistance of Russia and China has actually gone. I am assuming that it is significant, substantial. So let me put it in different scenarios. If the Chinese have in fact deployed a radar system that can detect 400 miles out from the borders of Iran, and has provided either the personnel to operate that system and or have trained Iran to operate it, and have integrated that radar system with China's vast satellite system. And they have also integrated that system with the Russian air defense, the S-300 and S-400 systems. If that has taken place, then Iran is very well positioned to inflict significant damage on the U.S. Combat Air Force. And to the point that if they could affect the kinds of losses that I believe they're capable of, it would create a political crisis for Donald Trump. Now, if in fact the support from China and Russia is not as great as I believe, then Iran's going to face they will face greater suffering. But we still forget that even in the midst of a surprise attack on June 13th of 2025, within hours, Iran was still capable of retaliating against Israel. And at that time, they avoided retaliating against the military bases. But not this time. And here's what leads me to believe that actually the support that the Chinese have provided is quite substantial, because the Chinese were publishing the satellite imagery showing where all the U.S. military air defense systems are deployed in these various bases in Saudi Arabia and Jordan. They're sending a message to the West. This is, it's not Iran on its own. So again, the role of assumptions is what people are told. I do know that the briefings that the U.S. Military intelligence are providing to their leadership and on to Trump are grossly underestimating Iran's capabilities. They are dismissing them as not terribly significant.
Remember the first video on the internet? 30 years of web on one platform. Check it out now.
Take the next step in treating your moderate to severe ulcerative colitis with Entyvio, the only gut-focused.
I think they will find out that they were wrong. But the problem is, when you're wrong on something like that, you've cost the lives of other people. And in contrast to what happened last June, Iran's got a couple of options. One, if, as I believe, China has provided extensive intelligence sharing along with Russia, that Iran will get an early warning once aircraft lift off to begin conducting an attack on Iran. And I think at that point, once Iran is assured that an attack is inbound, they will launch immediately on those U.S. bases. That will be the primary target, to go after the military infrastructure that will then hamper the ability of the United States to sustain such an attack. And so they will hold off before attacking Israel. But I think at that point, you can see Israel starting to get engaged. And then, this war is going to escalate. And Iran's going to suffer damage, but Israel will suffer greater damage. And the United States military forces, they'll be looking at potentially thousands of casualties in a short period of time that it'll be shocking to the American public. How could this happen? Because we fought wars for 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the total number of dead over those 20 years was 6,000. That's nothing. What happens if we get 6,000 in 2 weeks? That'll create a political firestorm for Donald Trump.
Larry, Trump administration tried to intimidate, the groups, they call it Hashdal Shabi in Iraq, just to inform them, if you enter the fight, if in terms of the attack on Iran, you're going to get hit by the United States. And on the other hand, we see that the U.S. Embassy in Beirut has reportedly evacuated its staff through the,
Yeah, that could I just comment? That I see as a warning sign that, in fact, an attack will take place. We have not, even though we've had this tremendous buildup of assets, and the timing and weather was such that we expected the attack to come. We didn't see no TAMs being issued, notice to airmen, stay out of this airspace, and we didn't see the evacuation of personnel from certain locations. Now, if that's true, if they're starting to evacuate certain embassies, then that's a sign that this attack's going to come. And boy, if it does, let me put it this way: the people who hate Donald Trump, they'll be thrilled, because this will destroy his presidency.
Pluto TV has a universe of free content.
And it's a sign for me that they couldn't even intimidate Hezbollah not to attack them. That's why they're evacuating the forces. That it's not going to work. I think the way that they were trying to somehow put pressure on Iraq and Iraqi government, and then put pressure on these groups, and they call it Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq. That's not going to work as well.
Yeah.
We're going to see some sort of multi-phase conflict, and it seems that it's going to be from Lebanon, in Iraq with Houthis. And how do you think that Israel would be somehow dealing with Iraq and I don't know, with Houthis and Hezbollah, then the United States dealing with Iran and Iraq? I don't know how what would be that combination of the reaction if that happens.
If the United States proceeds with an attack, the Houthis have not been firing at Israel. They've basically abided by the ceasefire. Now, they still haven't. My understanding is they still prevent any ships headed to Israel from transiting the Red Sea. But apart from that, they've stopped firing missiles at Israel. You could see the combination of the Houthis and Hezbollah, if they start adding their own supply of missiles into attacks on Israel, that's going to further more rapidly deplete the supply of air defense missiles, both for the Iron Dome, the Patriot, and the THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense System. And once those air defense missiles are exhausted, Israel is undefended. And Iran, I believe, in contrast to U.S. intelligence estimates, may have between 10 to 20,000 ballistic missiles. U.S. estimates are it's around 2,000. I think that's grossly understated.
Because the estimation that I've read is that Iran has produced 800 missiles, ballistic missiles, since the attack on Iran in June 2025. It was 8 months. Let's assume 100 a month they have produced ballistic missiles. I don't know how accurate is that, but it's going to be, in my opinion, going to be above that. But
yeah.
These numbers are not accurate, and nobody's talking about these numbers the way that it is, the reality of what is happening. Larry, the other thing would be the aircraft carrier, which is close to Greece right now, Gerald Ford.
Mm-hmm.
And Wall Street Journal reported that the title is Missed Funerals and Blocked Toilets. Iran deployment takes a toll on U.S. sailors. And these people are being, they're not happy with the situation they're in. But it seems that the United States is going to use this aircraft carrier to defend Israel as an air defense system.
Yeah, and it has limited capability. It's got 10. A normal squadron for an aircraft carrier is 10 F-35s, and the ability in an intense combat environment to sustain operations, they're going to run into problems. So that's why I say this is the force. The naval force is not that significant that's been deployed. What is significant is the air assets. I know at least close to 1/3 of all the U.S. Air Force combat assets have been deployed to the theater. That's a huge amount. Then, if they continue to remain there without being used for a while, then you're going to get a degradation in their capabilities over time.
President Trump trusts retired teacher Terry Leo Wilson because she's teaching liberals a lesson in Austin. Leo Wilson banned DEI programs.
Yeah. Larry, before wrapping up this session, let me shift the gear a little bit to Ukraine. I'm sure that you've heard what Boris Johnson said about sending British troops to Ukraine in order to facilitate, the whole process of negotiation and the deal and possible agreement. Do you see under any scenario that the Russian part would agree on the British on a situation, on a treaty that accepts that the British troop would be in Ukraine, close to the Russian border?
No, not at all. I think actually the real risk right now, or the unanswered question is, will Russia retaliate against the United Kingdom for this missile that hit a munitions factory more than 1,000 miles inside Russia the other day? It was done by the Brits, and this comes on the hill of the Russians announcing in public that the Brits also were involved with the assassination attempt on the number 2 man in Russian military intelligence. It would not surprise me if Russia moved to launch an Oreshnik missile against the factory or a military target inside the United Kingdom. As they're not going to play around anymore. And this would evoke outrage, and it would get NATO all up in arms and talk about, okay, we now got to have an Article 5. Are we going to attack Russia? They will. I think if that happens, they'll find that the Article 5 will collapse. So Britain has set itself up here, and I think that the Russians, the temperature in Russia among the leadership is that this can't go unanswered, and there will be a retaliation for this of some significance.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Welcome back.
Nima, only for you. It's 11 o'clock in Moscow. I am shattered because I had another crazy day. Tomorrow I have another even crazier day. But for you, of course. And obviously, today is, wow. We don't even know where to start. And very important, our conversation is one day before the 4 years of the special military operation. So we are at another one of those crossroads of history pregnant with meaning.
Exactly.
Okay, Nima, let's rock and roll.
Exactly. Let's start. Please hit the like button, helping us reaching more people. Pepe, let me start with what is happening in the West Asia, in the Middle East, the escalation that is happening, the way that Donald Trump has brought everything that he could send to the Middle East. And Iran on one side is prepared. The United States is prepared. The embassies of foreign countries are asking their people to get out of Iran. What is your assessment? What is your understanding of what's going on right now?
Well, we were talking before the start of this very, very important conversation. Nima and I were talking that we have reached the razor's edge in terms of a fateful decision. And the whole thing was brought by the President of the United States himself. So anything that he does, any decision that he makes, it's on him. It's his personal responsibility. Don't forget, we're talking about the man who destroyed the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, which was agreed in Vienna in 2015, then ratified by the UN. And this is a deal that was basically legalized by the UN, by all the participants of the discussions in Vienna. I was there at the time. I followed on an everyday basis in Vienna before they finally reached a deal, and then it went to the UN for ratification. So now, since he cannot have the deal that he wants, which is basically a capitulation of Iran, this is where we are in this fateful week. There may be a last chance saloon on Thursday in Geneva. We all know that it's going to start on very, very nasty terms, because basically Trump gave another ultimatum to Tehran, matter a little more than 72 hours, let's put it this way, max. And of course, he wants a capitulation. The Iranian diplomats, with the Foreign Minister Arakshi right in the front line, they keep saying, as politely as possible, we are open to an adult diplomatic discussion, and we may have some concessions regarding only the Iranian nuclear program, nothing to do with the ballistic missile program or the support to the axis of resistance. But this was part of the triad, the diktats imposed by, of course, Israel and by Trump 2.0. So whatever happens after this last chance saloon in Geneva, the decision, according to many of our close friends, independent analysts, echoes coming from the Beltway, from Washington, etc., is that the decision to attack Iran, we still don't know how, has already been made. So now we are in the how stage. This means how this massive armada, which, of course, as the bunch of cowards that they are not in the Persian Gulf. They are not in the Sea of Oman. They are very far away in the Arabian Sea. They are not very far from the Pakistani coast in the north. So how this massive armada, etc., is going to be employed to do what? Is it going to be a sort of mini shock and awe like against Iraq in 2003? Is it going to be a decapitation strike, which is a typical Israeli procedure? They're going to go after Ayatollah Khamenei and the political leadership of Iran, including members of the parliament of the Majlis and members of the IRGC commanding structure. So all the options are on the table. Whatever Neo Caligula, the undisputed tariff champion of the world, decides, he is between a rock and a hard place. If he decides not to attack, his donors, the people who gave him hundreds of millions of dollars for his re-election campaign, the international Zionist axis, which is not only the Beltway, New York, New Jersey, but the international financial Zionist axis all over the world, Atlanticist, and with tentacles all across Europe and in many parts of the world. They're going to go for him. And of course, don't forget, literally, practically all the nodes of the industrial military complex, they want this attack against Iran. This, in terms of how Washington and the system works in the Beltway, Washington, Maryland, Virginia, and inside the industrial military complex, and that includes everybody, weapons makers, CIA, Pentagon, all sorts of that acronym of intel agencies, media, think tanks, academia, practically everybody. They are in favor, and not only since the start of Trump 2.0, for 47 years, they are in favor of let's attack and then let's get rid of the mullahs in their very childish, trademark, stupid denomination. So he is, if he is seriously considering not to attack, he's a minority, even as a president, even with the power to, like one of the old Caesars, that's it, death to all of you inside the Colosseum. But he is constrained, restrained, and his margin of maneuver is practically zero. Even if we have, as we do, there are a few people with an IQ over room temperature in the Pentagon, especially, because they gamed all the scenarios in case of an attack on Iran and in case of a devastating Iranian response, and everything is included. Attacks on U.S. military bases all across West Asia, blocking the Strait of Hormuz in different ways, you name it. Direct response against Israel is going to be much, much more devastated than during the 12-day war, etc. Still, his instincts may be telling him that this is political suicide, assuming he listens to voices of reason. We cannot count these voices of reason inside his inner circle. As you know, Nima, in our audience, most of you know, because they are a bunch of extremely mediocre functionaries. The absolute majority, mega Zionists, purveyors of fake news in terms of everything that happens in Iran. They've never been to Iran. They don't know shit about Iran, not to mention Persian culture, Persian history, etc. So obviously, when you have this sycophantic echo chamber around you, you cannot make an informed decision. And if you compound all that, which is already a lot, with the fact that this guy does not read anything, he does not read not only intel reports, he doesn't read books, he doesn't read anything. He only sees Fox News, and the most effective soundbite is what registers in his brain for maybe 5 seconds, until somebody whispers something stupid in his brain, and then there's another 5 seconds. That's it. He has the attention span of a 4-year-old, as magisterially described by our friend Jeffrey Sachs. So how can a character like that make an informed decision of a war that, if it is launched, even if it's a mini strike or a localized strike or whatever, carries the potential of setting fire to the whole of West Asia and beyond, across the global south? And, if there is a cherry on this incandescent volatile cake, he would be launching a war against 3 BRICS at the same time. Not only Iran, but Russia and China. linked to Iran by their own strategic partnerships. In the case of Russia and Iran, very serious because it includes exchange of military hardware and software. And in the case of China, there are 20-year-long strategic partnership valued at least $450 billion, because for China, Iran is a matter of national security as one of China's top energy suppliers and a key actor in the new Silk Roads and in the east to west connectivity corridors across Eurasia, and most of them go through Iran, including the new one that the Chinese are ready to invest on it. Because once again, everything that goes through Russia because of sanctions is blocked. Chinese companies, for instance, they cannot use the Trans-Siberian because of sanctions traveling through Russian territory. So the next best option, which is already being used, is via Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, and then Turkey, and all the way to Europe. It's one of the declinations of the middle corridor. And then there are other declinations. Some go through the Caucasus as well. But Iran is in the middle of whatever east to west corridor, part of the Belt and Road Initiative, part of the New Silk Roads. And this is, once again, the relationship between Persia and China since times immemorial, since, for instance, the 7th century, where the two top powers in Eurasia, and for that matter in the world, were Sassanid Persia and the Tang dynasty in China. And guess what they were doing, Nima?
File your taxes 100% free in the app if you didn't file with us last year. Just file with TurboTax Do-It-Yourself.
Trade. Silk Roads. Let's trade with each other via Central Asia, but it was Persia trading with China and vice versa. So, these links is not a matter of a mere strategic partnership signed a few years ago. No, this goes back in history. So China will have Iran's back at several levels. Some we do know, which is Chinese raiders, Chinese research ships, Chinese ultra high-tech information that is being passed in real time to Iran. Some we don't know, which is part of lots of Chinese cargo planes who landed in Iran this past few weeks, as many as a lot of Russian cargo planes, IL-76, who landed in Iran this past few weeks, the same thing. So diplomatically, of course, they are supported. In terms of BRICS, they are supported. In terms of regimenting the global south to understand that this is a war against three BRICS, and at the same time, a war against the global south as a whole. If Trump starts this war, this is the culmination of the new administration in the United States war, hybrid, otherwise, including hot, against the global south, against BRICS, in this case, against three BRICS, or even four BRICS, if we count India, because this is a war against the Russia, Iran, India connectivity corridor, not only against the Chinese New Silk Roads. So this is a war of the Americans and the Zionist International against four top BRICS, their connectivity corridors, and the integration of Eurasia as a whole. And this is something that anybody in the global south, you can be in the Argentinian Pampa, or you can be in the Sahel, or you can be in the middle of Sulawesi in Indonesia. Anybody can understand. This is a war against us, the global south. Obviously, the megalomaniac in the White House, he cannot think along these terms. He doesn't even know what BRICS means or what global south means. He only cares about his megalomaniac dreams of receiving Nobel Prize, winning the midterms. Well, it's very simple. If he does that, he already lost the midterms. And he's going to be reduced to the role of a lame tariffed duck starting the end of this year. So if he thinks along these terms, and he does, he would refrain from attacking. He can come up with some sort of strike somewhere, picking up the phone and telling the Iranians, look, I'm going to bomb so and so everything is evacuated, no civilian victims, so he can sell to the world. Look, I struck Iran again. Remember that he struck Iran before. He said, we obliterated their nuclear program. Mega fake news, because now he wants to attack Iran and bomb Iran again against the nuclear program that was obliterated in the first place. Oh, this is, okay, it sounds like a circus, the way I'm telling you how it works, but it is a circus. It's a circus of overlapping fake narratives. But now, in the middle of there is this razor's edge decision. Whatever he decides, the consequences are going to be ominous. If he decides for any sort of attack, including so he can always tell American public opinion and the rest of the world, look, we didn't start this thing. It was the Israelis. So now we have to protect Israel. They are actually considering this subterfuge as well. It doesn't matter, because the response from Iran will be there. The support by Russia and China to Iran will be there. And he cannot fool the whole global South at the same time. So that's where we are, Nima. It's one of the, okay, every week we are at a crossroads, but this one is the real deal, because this one will seal what's going to happen from now on in the major battlefield. And the major battlefield has been clear for quite some time. The main adversary for the empire of chaos, plunder, permanent strikes, fake news, etc., is China. But it's not only China, it's the global South as a whole. It's China and Russia, which are still seen as threats. It's the global South as a whole. So on one side, we have the empire of chaos and the Zionist international, and on the other side, we have BRICS and the global South. This is the battlefield. And whatever happens in Iran is going to be at the center of everything that's going to happen from now on.
We desperately need your support to save this house of Allah. Your donation will help install new prayer carpets.
Pepe, your understanding of a limited attack on Iran, do you think is that possible from what you are witnessing right now? Donald Trump, a limited attack on Iran, he said that Axios is, I think, one of the most, I don't believe anything that Axios reports.
No, we cannot. Axios, by the way, you're correct, Nima. I'm just adding to your information. Axios is a Zionist channel, outlet, news agency, media, whatever they call it. It's basically a disinformation outfit run by Zionists, and all their reporters are Zionists as well. So you cannot trust anything that they say, publish, etc., that is leaked, etc., because it's leaked from Zionists to Zionists, and then it's disseminated by Zionists. So you cannot trust them. Simple.
Yeah. The question is, how does a limited war help the Trump and the Trump administration and Donald Trump himself in order to achieve? I don't know anybody. Do you understand what are the objectives of Donald Trump right now? If the attack, let's assume that he's going to attack Iran. What are the objectives? I think it's so important to ask ourselves, what are the objectives of the United States attacking Iran?
He doesn't have objectives, Nima. The objectives are the Zionist objectives. And there's only one Zionist objective vis-a-vis Iran. Smash Iran as a regional power in West Asia, period. There's nothing else. If you look at what's coming from Tel Aviv, from Israeli politicians, from absolutely ghastly characters like Huckabee, which is now saying what hardcore Zionists have been saying all along. In fact, he let the cat out of the bag completely. Israel has the right to annex anything they want in West Asia. And this is a bloody American saying, a bloody American politician employed by the President of the United States, to whom he owes favors. It's the only good thing about all this is everything now is in the open. It used to be, couched in diplomatic language or in wishful thinking or, in some nuggets in the middle of an interview. Now it's in the open, not only via the Zionists themselves, but via American politicians and practically everybody in Capitol Hill in Washington. They think alongside the same lines. After all, most of them are bought and paid for by AIPAC. If you go there and you see how AIPAC works, well, I am one of, I had the non-privilege to actually see that in front of me in Washington, D.C. years ago. Then you understand everything. So there are no, as you asked correctly, what does Trump himself plan to get out of it? Nothing. And in terms of American the national interests of the United States of America is going to be mega counterproductive, because it's going to have most of the lens of Islam against it. It's going to have a great deal of the Arab world, even those stooges posing as leaders across the Arab world, against it. And some of them already said, don't do anything because you're going to set the whole region on fire. And he's going to have the global south against it, not to mention the top two powers in the global south, Russia and China. So what does the United States gain with an unprovoked, unilateral, once again, fake news-driven attack on Iran? Less than zero. Well, if we go back to what's been happening since the Vietnam War, it's usually the same scenario, right?
Yeah. Pepe, Iranian foreign minister, he feels that he is in the process of negotiations with the United States. And he said recently in his latest interview, he said that as you've mentioned, the only case to be negotiated is the nuclear program of Iran. Iran is not going to negotiate considering the Iranian ballistic missiles. They're not going to negotiate considering the support for the acts of resistance. So on the other hand, he said in Iran, he said, I'm going to do my job. He said to the military, you're going to do your job. Don't care about what I'm doing, what I'm, trying to do. You have to be well prepared for any sort of war. I think the war that is coming, that may happen between Iran and the United States, is going to be a new war that could drastically influence the face of the Middle East. Because it's not just the war between Iran and the United States, that Israel would somehow be more than happy to have this war. After all, Netanyahu is achieving, if that happens, Netanyahu is achieving something that he was wishing for forever. He was always wanted this sort of war happening. But we know that today's West Asia, today's Middle East is totally different from what it was before October the 7th. Because right now, as you've mentioned, Mike Huckabee said it, that all the Middle East is going to be Israel. Israel going to capture all of these countries. They don't have anything to resist against Israel, Pepe. That's why, and Israel, not only Iran, sees Turkey as their enemy as well because of what's going on in Syria. But when it comes to Iran, focusing on the situation with Iran, do you think that the war would drag on, would somehow drag the United States into some sort of conflict as we saw in Afghanistan, in Iraq? That is the end. I think China doesn't need to do anything else because Donald Trump is putting the United States in a big trap that it doesn't need anybody to hit him. He's going to get hit by the war that he's creating.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it. That's the core of our conversation. There are no gains in terms of national security for the US. There are no gains even for himself personally, because he's going to lose the midterms and he's going to become a lame duck if he launches this war. MAGA is against it. 70% of the American electorate on both sides, three sides, including independents, etc., is against this war. They are worried about the deep well, the deep, dark well that they are financially, economically. But from the point of view of an empire in extreme distress, there's only one solution, Nima, and we all know what it is: war. A war that might reconfigure the chessboard financially, economically, politically, with unexpected results, of course, but a shakeup. And of course, once again, deviating attention by American domestic public opinion from their economic ills, changing the subject, changing the narrative, which is something that suits not only the White House, but especially the war criminal sitting in Tel Aviv with his legal troubles. And of course, it answers this, I would say, God-given right given by that stupid book that they adore for Zionists everywhere, that they have the right to do what they want in West Asia, conquer everybody and kill everybody, because everybody, after all, is Amalek. They are the only ones entitled to rule over mankind, if possible. They cannot rule on Latin America, on Africa, on Southeast Asia, on China, on India, but they can rule the West, which to a certain extent they already do. So it's pathetic. It's pathetic. I don't waste my time anymore in philosophical debate about Zionism. It's a waste. Everybody knows what they are after. Now it's in the open. And because they run the machinery of government, no matter who is in power, they can get away with it. So, if this war would not turn into, I would say, there will be tragic overtones for Iran if the war goes on. A lot of people will be killed. But if this was not the case, it would be the perfect excuse in terms of the Iranian counterpunch to finally get rid of all these people. We know it's not that easy. They have nuclear weapons. And obviously, because they are cowards, if they see that they're going down, they will release their invisible nuclear weapons, which are never discussed. But even people in the middle of the Sahara Desert knows that Israel is a nuclear power. But you cannot, obviously, touch the subject, of course, total taboo. So the problem is that in terms, once again, of human suffering for Iran and for people all across West Asia, this is going to be unbearable. But it might be the price to pay to inflict a definitive lesson on the Zionists. Once again, Anima, being realistic, we all know it's not that easy. But it could be the preamble for something much, much bigger later on, of course. And they need a correction, and a correction by history. Not only the horrible karma that they have accumulated, especially these past 2.5 years or so, by committing a genocide and getting away with it. In terms of bad karma, in historical terms, it's up there with some of the worst excesses that we've seen across history. So they need a correction. Maybe it's not going to come now, but now could be the preamble for a much larger correction later on. And we know it's not going to come from those pathetic Arab nations run by, gangsters like MBZ in the United Arab Emirates. It's not going to come from these people. It will have to come from Iran, and it will have to come from the axis of resistance as a whole. Even now, they are debilitated, they are challenged, they are still recovering, but they can still pack a punch. And if this war happens in the next few days, we will have maybe a sample of how strong is their punch at the moment, and it will get much stronger in time. But any scenario, I'm sorry, Nima. I get very depressed with the big picture of Iran, and why no? How we got to this so quickly? With just a little more than a year with this new American administration. Of course, in the beginning, we could suspect that this would happen, but only after a while. Maybe, perhaps nearing the end of his term. No, it's happening right at the beginning. Right at the beginning. We still have 3 more years of this system ruling the United States. And even if it's a lame duck system, it's still going to be very, very dangerous for the last 2 years. So is the planet ready to become a hostage of this system and of this conjunction between what we could call the United States of Epstein Island, the Epstein Island Syndicate, the direct connection between Western elites, Atlanticist elites, American elites, and all of them being part of this Epstein Island ethos. Now that anybody across the global south can see how it works and how these people, this nodes of the Anglo-American oligarchy, linked to the Atlanticist oligarchy. There are a lot of people in Europe who are directly involved in the Epstein syndicate. How they rule the world, and always thought that they would be completely immune to any repercussions, that they could always get away with it. You know, it's like try to get into the mind of that absolutely ghastly Prince Andrew of the British royal family. His sense of entitlement, according to people who actually met him in person, is something they said it's out of proportion. We've never seen anything like it, because he always knew deep inside that he could get away with anything. So finally, now we have a little bit of poetic justice, or a little bit of a karma intervening, you know. So we could expand that on a global level, and maybe the Zionist International, they will meet their karma sooner rather than later. We can only hope, of course. But when you look at the reality, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. It's a great deal of the planet hostage of this small, extremely noxious, toxic oligarchy. And we know, now we even know the names.
I'm not really a cupcake, but I am super baked, thanks to Mood Can.
Mood is third-party testing.
It's still nothing happens.
Yeah, I think, Pepe, when it comes to the war with Iran, we have to consider what would be the reaction, not only from Iran, but the other, you know, the axis of resistance. I'm talking about Yemen, Iraq,
and Hezbollah,
and how they're going to participate, how they're going to get involved in the war.
Yeah.
Because if we assume that Donald Trump and the United States alone going to attack Iran, that's going to be some sort of confrontation between Iran and the United States. But if Iran said that they consider Israel as the main target if the attack happens, and this would bring Israel into the war, and then the acts of resistance come in my opinion. And how do you see the Strait of Hormuz together with Bab el-Mandab? These are two important corridors, two important places for the global energy and the global economy. How do you see that playing out in the whole situation?
Well, many of us, myself included, we wrote about that already. My last column about that, I think, was 2 years, 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. This is something that I have been following since the past decade. When I talked to Persian Gulf traders, I talked to old pre-CIA top of the line retired officers. We discussed the projections by Goldman Sachs, derivatives specialists, and the correction of the numbers, and themselves were correcting the numbers by the Bank of International Settlements on the pile of derivatives. And everybody knew that these discussions were, 2017, 2018, 2019, these discussions were open. Involved a lot of people. Sometimes, some like Zoltan Poznar from Credit Suisse, sometimes he addressed that directly in his letters to subscribers. This would, if that happens, and if the Strait of Hormuz is blocked one way or another, it doesn't matter how, but if it's blocked, and it doesn't matter how, it can be by mining, it can be by an official, it can be by a partial block, you name it. This will implode the global economy, especially because this pile of derivatives, and the numbers are in the quadrillions. They're not in the trillions, like the Bank of International Settlements had calculated about nearly 10 years ago. So Donald Trump, if he starts this war, and if the Strait of Hormuz is blocked one way or another, it doesn't matter how, he would be responsible for the collapse of the global economy, period. Obviously, this is not on his mind because he doesn't have idiots around him, sycophants to tell him. This would be the number one consequence, of course. And obviously, he would not listen to finance specialists who could explain that to him in 5 minutes. They're not there. And he's not going to call them. And obviously, they will be blocked by the circle of sycophants. So this could be something extraordinary in terms of the end of an empire in not in slow motion, but in ultra accelerated motion, provoked by the empire itself, by the emperor himself. That's one possibility. The other possibility is Iran could more or less organize an incremental blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which would be death by 1,000 cuts, once again, on global trade and on the global economy. They have many ways of doing it, many techniques, the timing. They can, variate the timing. So the initiative is on Iran once again, and depending on the attack, if it's a lightning strike, if it's a shock and awe style strike, if it's a decapitation strike, they have scenarios for their response for all of these counter punches. So and this is visible, Nima, the way not only Arakshi is speaking, self-confident, unflappable, cool, calm, calculating, and the Iranian army, the IRGC, deputies in the Majlis, everybody seems to be quite self-confident that, look, we gamed everything, we are prepared, we know what's coming, we know it can be devastating, but our response is going to be equally or even more devastating. So that's what changed compared to the 12-day war. We are in a completely different territory. And you have been to Iran recently. I'm sure you sensed this. This is something that you sense epidermically. It's not quantifiable conceptually or intellectually. It's something that you feel, and you feel in your gut. I'm sure you felt this new sense of self-confidence from the part of the Iranian administration. Yes, we can, we can absorb that and then give it back.
And they're prepared. I think they're.
I'm asking you. Did you feel that way when you were in Iran until a few days ago?
No sign of fear.
No sign of fear.
No sign of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And they are all prepared. And when I was in Iran, they were talking about this Delta, special forces that went to Venezuela and all of this nonsense. Said those Delta forces, if they come to Iran, they're going to be smashed. They don't have any sort of understanding what they're going to face in Iran. But Pepe, Iranian culture is so deep that many people in the West don't understand what is that. You have to, even those people who are not living in Iran, who are outside of Iran for many, many years, like me, I'm outside of Iran for more than 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In Iran lives in you. It doesn't matter if you're not in Iran. Iran is living in you. And when you go to Iran talking with those people, you see the confidence. You saw how they're prepared for the worst case scenario. You somehow are amazed and how these people are so much courageous and they know what they're going to face. They know how powerful. They don't ignore that the United States is nothing, is a paper tiger, is did. No, they say the United States is powerful and we're going to respond to that even more powerful if they attack us. This is the understanding on their part. They're not trying to diminish the United States. They're trying to say we're going to respond the way that we see we are capable of. And I think Iran is totally prepared. You cannot see any sort of fragility, any sort of fear in the mind of those people that I've talked with. And I think that it's going to be a disaster for the United States. I really think that's going to be a disaster for the United States. It doesn't matter how devastating the war could be for Iran. Iran going to survive. Iran going to come out of this war. And the United States is not going to be able to win this war. This war is one way. Iran is fighting for its survival. And the United States is just making a war of choice. United States is a proxy for Israel in this conflict. And Iran totally understands the situation. That's why Iran would go all in to defeat the United States. And they're going to do it. I believe that they're going to do it. I don't know what is the understanding of the Trump administration, because these people are not of the mindset of a continuous war. What Russia is doing in Ukraine, they feel that they're going to get in. And what they did in Venezuela, they really feel. I'm so amazed by this sort of, ignorance in the Trump administration, that they feel that they can go to do something, bomb in Iran and Iran going to capitulate. Iran is not going to capitulate. Iran has fought the United States during 8 years of war against Iraq.
Exactly.
In those days, Iran was so weak because it was right after the revolution. There was nothing. And Iran fought for 8 years. They have lost a lot of young people in those wars. And not only the United States, Soviet Union, Europeans, all together were against Iran in that war. And Iran has fought that war. And
Meet Mel, a revolutionary way to stop food from becoming waste.
I think this time around going to be different because Iran is totally prepared. The situation is not going to be the same as it was before. Russia and China know who is the enemy and why is the main reason of this sort of conflict against Iran. If it could be some sort of American agenda behind this, because we know what is shaping in the East in terms of BRICS and how that could be, drastically problematic for the United States and for the future of the United States. If they feel that this sort of war can save them, can bring the jobs back in the United States, that's totally wrong. I think this is a fatal mistake on the part of the Trump administration. This is my feeling about it.
No, you're absolutely right, Nima. But okay, it's would be because we are outside. It'll be easy for us to say, okay, let your enemy commit a mistake. Don't interrupt him while he's making such a mistake. The problem is this mistake will implied in this mistake, it will be a lot of suffering for Iran, for the Iranian people, and there will be blood. That's the problem. It won't stop only with a localized strike or a surgical strike or a decapitation strike. That's the problem, the repercussions, of course. And the empire never learns from its mistakes. They keep committing the same mistakes over and over again. And in terms of desperation or changing the subject, we need a war to change the narrative from our basically all our bubbles imploding, which is what's going to happen sooner rather than later, and the unpayable debt of the United States. Well, the repercussions will be there and they will pay the price. The problem is others will also pay the price. Nima, we have 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
I would like to end our conversation. I would like to end our conversation on a higher level. And as our Chinese friends say, in a more auspicious manner. Instead of talking about war, let's talk about what Iran and Eurasia are doing. Yeah. And that brings us to, you saw it, you told me that you saw it.
Just let me play a part of it.
Please play a part of it for our audience, and then please explain to them. You can go to the site of Press TV and you can watch the full documentary. It's very, very easy. It's now uploaded. It's now online on Press TV's website. Please, Nima.
Yeah.
Some places can't be understood just by looking at a map. You have to walk them, breathe the air, listen to the signs hidden in their silence. Iran is one of those places. I'm Pepe Escobar, geopolitical analyst. For decades, I followed countless trails where power moves, from the west down to the east. But no land has gripped my mind the way Iran has. Rooted in history, yet always reaching toward the future. And a land that once again just might rewrite the rules of the game. So here I am, searching for something that's been largely overlooked and unheard. Tehran, layers and layers of time. It's imperative to come to the brain of Iran's decision-making, where maps are drawn and pieces in the chessboard are moved. Tehran is not just the capital of Iran. It may soon become the capital of a new Eurasian project, somewhere between Shanghai and St. Petersburg. An official invitation to the Sob Film Festival brought me here.
I am a geopolitical analyst. I'm very well known in the West, in Russia.
Iran is a priceless ancient bridge between East and West. Around 2,500 years ago, the Achaemenid Empire built a royal road, a 2,500-kilometer-long route stretching from Susa to Sardis. This grand artery symbolized mastery over land routes and facilitated trade between great empires. During the Sasanian era, the Silk Road, Asia's vital lifeline, ran through the heart of, where else? Iran. Caravans of silk, spices, and precious goods moved along these paths, carrying with them cultures, ideas, and civilizations. In the Middle Ages, Islamic empires expanded both land and sea routes. The ports of the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman became Iran's gateways to the world. Today, Iran sits at a strategic crossroads between the Caspian Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the overland routes of the Caucasus and Central Asia. It is striving to transform the north-south and east-west corridors into powerful interconnected arteries, routes that carry not only commerce, but the shifting weight of regional and global geopolitics.
It's Chick Days at Murdoch's Ranch and Home Supply. Wherever you are in your chicken raising journey, stop by Murdoch's for
Yeah.
Well, this is let's say a little bit of the starter, where we set the scene for our trip. And because we went to the Caspian, then we crossed Iran, we went to the Persian Gulf, to the Sea of Oman, to the port of Chabahar, and we ended on the maritime Iran-Pakistan border. So for all of you, our audience, this was an extraordinary adventure for a foreigner. Don't forget, the Iranians trusted a foreigner to tell the story of the most important connectivity corridor in their modern history that they are building with the Russians and with the Indians, the International North-South Transportation Corridor. That's the theme of our documentary. And for me, it was an immense honor and a humbling experience. They said, what do you need? So they gave me an absolutely outstanding pro team, and we traveled together literally everywhere. And of course, we had the necessary permits. We had full access. We could talk to the authorities of the port of Bandar Abbas, for instance. They opened the port for us. In Chabahar, same thing, one of the ports of the future, the same thing. So it's fascinating for all of you to see really on the ground, how do you build a connectivity corridor in the 21st century? It's an absolutely outstanding experience involving three BRICS, very, very important, Russia, Iran, and India. And this is parallel to the Chinese Silk Roads, of course. So this documentary is focused on the north-south corridor because it's the first one in English in the world that starting to tell the story of this new corridor. So, I came up with a very simple formulation that I'm trying to, here in Russia, in all the interviews that I give here in Russia, to look, in the middle of all this hysterical dementia about war on Iran, there's the other side of the story. Make connectivity corridors, not wars, which is, in a sense, the definition of Eurasia integration. This is what Indians understand, Iranians understand, Russians understand, the Chinese understand. So from the other side, the first 50 minutes of our conversation today, Nemo, we only talked about war. So, this is the other side of the story. This is what here is being done all across Eurasia. They're building trade arteries, connectivity corridors. They are building ways of very, very similar to what was the mindset during the ancient Silk Roads. So I am an ancient Silk Road fanatic for a long time. Last year, I went to Xinjiang to do a documentary about the Silk Road in Xinjiang, which we're now editing. I hope it's ready within the next 3 or 4 months. And this, in Iran, the chance that they gave me to do this, and hopefully we get a global audience to see our documentary, is basically, you all remember the 60s, then make peace, not war. In the 21st century is make connectivity, not war.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Pepe. Grande prazer, como sempre.
Grande prazer. Thank you. And thank you for letting me talk about it.
Coffee. Follow me.